No society can be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. The words of Adam Smith in his book The Wealth of Nations, written here in Kirkcaldy. Tonight we are in the theatre, opened in 1899 as a memorial to the great philosopher and economist. So do his words still inspire the politicians who will be looking for your votes in the run-up to the general election? Let's find out. Welcome to Debate Night. Between now and the general election, Debate Night will be travelling Scotland, giving you the chance to scrutinise the politicians, the policies and the promises as well. On our panel this evening, the Deputy Leader of Scottish Labour, MSP for Dumbarton, Dame Jackie Baillie. Jackie's the party spokesperson for health and social care and was named Scottish Politician of the Year last year by the Herald. From the SNP, Tommy Sheppard is MP for Edinburgh East. He quit the Labour Party to join the SNP in 2014 and is now the party spokesperson for Scotland. Lorna Slater is co-leader of the Scottish Greens and an MSP for Lothian. Lorna was a former minister in the Scottish Government until the end of the Butte House Agreement last month. Also with us from the Liberal Democrats in Scotland, Jardine, MP for Edinburgh West. Christine is the party spokesperson for Scotland, Women and Equalities. Before entering politics, she was a journalist and a lecturer. And finally, from the Scottish Conservatives, Luke Graham, a former MP. Luke was head of Downing Street's Union Unit under Boris Johnson. He's hoping to be re-elected to politics with a Scottish seat in the forthcoming general election. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And of course, welcome to our studio audience here in Kirkcaldy, our first time with you. It's great to be here this evening. And you can join in the discussion from home, wherever you are in Scotland. BBCDN is the hashtag you need right now to join the debate on social media. And our Debate Night podcast will be available for you to download straight after the show this evening. So let's get started. Our first question of the night comes from Donald Mackin. Donald, evening.
Hi there, it's Macon.
Macon. Sorry, Donald. Good evening.
If you won the election, what's the first thing you would do to fix the United Kingdom?
Thank you, Donald. Tommy Sheppard, would Scottish independence fix the United Kingdom?
Well, I think it would fix Scotland, that's for sure, because it would give us the opportunity to make decisions for ourselves. And I think it's a matter of simple democratic principle that the people who live in the country are the ones who should decide its future. So we will certainly be seeking that as a mandate at the coming election. Independence will take some time, though, so we'll be pressing on many other fronts as well.
On that mandate, you said in January to the Sunday Herald, Tommy, that if Scotland did not vote for the SNP, the majority of seats at the general election, then independence goes away, it goes off the table. Is that still the case?
Well, it stalls. It doesn't, I mean, it goes away for as long as the people want it to go away, but then there will be many subsequent general elections where there'll be, and Scottish elections, where there's the opportunity for people to express their views. I mean, my view, my view is that, you know, the journey to Scotland's independence is a process. We have an opportunity at this election to take a step forward in that and to renew the mandate and to illustrate to people what independence could mean in terms of the powers that it would bring to people here. If we get a mandate for that, then I think the process goes forward. If we don't, then I think others will try and close that debate down and deny the people of Scotland that a chance.
What you actually said was
people should be very, very wary.
What you said, it will stop. You're now saying it will stall. No, you said stop at the time.
It will stop until the next opportunity for people to express their opinion, but which is coming up pretty quickly, to be honest.
Jackie Baillie, Keir Starmer has given us 6 steps that he will immediately take to fix the UK. What's the first one that he needs to concentrate on, in your view?
Well, to be honest, people are crying out for change. The number of conversations I've had, you know, in the past few weeks where people are really struggling with the cost of living crisis. They're struggling because the economy is not growing. Our public services are being, you know, literally shredded before our eyes. My first preference, and one that's dear to my heart, is the NHS First Step pledge that we have put in place, where across the UK, there will be thousands upon thousands of more appointments. In Scotland, that would equate to 160,000 additional NHS appointments to get on top of the waiting list, to deal with the backlog, because people are sitting in pain.
So how's that going to work? Because so the NHS, healthcare has devolved to Scotland, so how are you going to institute change here from Westminster?
Because when there is spend at Westminster, 10% of that money comes directly to Scotland. So that's an opportunity for the Scottish Government to spend. But I have to say to you, what people are saying to me is that they are sick of being let down by two governments. 14 years of chaos with the Tories, 17 years of failure with the SNP. This is an opportunity we should not miss.
So the change is more money for Scotland.
This is an opportunity to vote for change. It's not just more money for Scotland, it's things like making work pay with the New Deal for working people. It's about bringing energy bills down by setting up GB Energy, headquartered in Scotland, creating more jobs.
We might come on, we'll talk about one thing, Jackie. We may come on to some of that. I just wanted one thing. And I'd like to hear from the audience now, the one thing that you think needs to be done to fix the UK. Lorna, Slater, you don't want to just fix the UK, you want to fix the world when it comes to the environment. How's that going to work via the general election?
The general election, of course, is an opportunity for the Scottish Greens to make sure that climate is at the top of every discussion. Because without us in the room, it tends to get forgotten, dropped off the table. And this isn't just a matter of being an existential crisis, the kind of flooding and wildfires. This is actually a matter of our economic future. Any country that lags behind or is slow or delayed in investing in that future for net zero is going to lose out. We'll end up buying other people's electric cars and wind turbines instead of building them ourselves, instead of having that growing green economy. So it is so important that Scotland leads the way and really leans into the opportunities we have in renewable energy, green hydrogen.
Do you need independence to be able to do that?
Well, Jackie Baillie has herself just outlined the kind of things that can only be done from Westminster. And while it would be brilliant, of course, to have an incoming government in Westminster who committed to getting rid of austerity and investing properly in climate, the Labour Party did U-turn on their climate investment pledges. So without an independent Scotland, I don't know how we're going to get the change we need.
They've also promised 69,000 green jobs this week. Will you work with them on that?
The Scottish Greens, we want to see that green future happen. We will, of course, and we've always said, we'll work on common issues where we have them.
OK, let's hear from the audience. The one thing that needs to be done to fix the UK, man in the middle with the blue top. On you go.
I'd say that Jackie Baillie's right, saying we need a change, but I don't think it's a change she's talking about. If she thinks that trading the Tories for the Labour Party is going to be a change, she's delusional, because they've just become the same party, and I think they should just maybe merge and get on with it. But I would also like to say that I'm not surprised to hear Tommy Sheppard, the very first thing he said tonight, and he talked about stalling. And in my opinion, it's his party that is stalling on independence, and they need to seriously sort themselves out.
Thank you. A lady in the green top, the second row. Yeah, when you go.
Really just about what Jackie was just saying there, change. I agree with the gentleman that's just spoken. There will be no change with a Labour government. And actually, why should we trust a Labour government to look after our NHS when Labour-run Wales is abysmal? It's the worst performer in the UK. Why would we?
Thank you. All roads lead back to Westminster. What's the first thing, Christine Jardine, you would do to fix the UK? 62% of Scots voted to remain in the European Union. Why don't you just address Brexit?
Well, what we have to do is fix the economy. That is the key to everything. It's the key to being able to fix the NHS, which, like Jackie, I think, would be my first priority. We want to spend £1 billion a year on creating 8,000 new GPs, encouraging GPs who are currently leaving the profession because of the problems with the pension scheme.
What about committing to rejoin the EU?
What we have said about the EU is that we want to have a better relationship with the EU. We want to rebuild links with the EU in the way that other countries have done, like Norway and Switzerland, and get back into the single market, because that's where small businesses are suffering. They're not able to trade. Our food processors in Scotland are not able to trade with the continent the way they were. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be easy. And I find it quite contradictory that the SNP, who say, oh, well, you know, we should leave the UK, argue that we shouldn't have left the EU. It's an economic union. It's good for Scotland. The EU was an economic union which was good for Britain. The UK is an economic union which is
why don't
good
you
for
want us to get back into it then?
It's not just about us though, Stephen, because the Europeans have to agree to it and we have to rebuild that relationship. We've damaged it spectacularly badly by the way that it was all handled. We have to rebuild it and we have to regain their trust. We have to rebuild the trade agreements. We have to look at bilateral agreements. We have to get back into the single market before we do anything else. Yes, eventually, I would like to see us back at the heart of Europe. But I'm realistic, and I know it's not going to happen overnight.
So that's stalled, like independence?
No,
then,
it's not
is it?
stalled. We won't stop working for it in the way that the SNP will stop working for independence. We will keep working to build a closer relationship with Europe.
Okay.
You can't accuse me of being obsessed by independence on the one hand and then say I've stopped.
All right, I want to make sure I give it.
Hang on.
I want to make sure I give everyone equal time here tonight. We're in an election campaign. Luke Graham from the Scottish Conservatives. You've had 14 years to fix the UK. Why haven't you?
I think in Scotland, we're in a very clear and different position to other parts of the UK. We've had the SNP in for 17 years, and the things I hear on the doorstep all the time is the fact that education is falling off in terms of standards. We've got record waiting lists in terms of our local NHS, and also we've got the lowest level of police officers since 2008. So for me, the biggest priorities are investment and education. And investment is we've had £3 billion of levelling up funds awarded to Scotland in the past year or 18 months, is to make sure these projects actually realise, they're built, they create jobs, new opportunities for young people, for working people, to make sure we can get out there and make sure they're delivered. And then secondly, for education, although majority devolved, there's a lot of good lessons that can be learnt from other parts of the UK where actually education standards are rising rather than falling. So whether that's Teach First programmes that we could bring up here, whether it's looking at some of the reforms that we're taking down south as well, that could be applied to some of our schools to really give our young people the best possible opportunity.
Look, the question
and
is
also,
about fixing the UK. What's broken about it, in your view?
I think, right now, if I'm honest, I think the whole world is broken. I mean, if you're looking across the international scene, every country is facing the major challenges, not only in inflation, not only in instability, not only in climate change. And so I think...
What about particularly here, though, in the UK? What's different?
I think a lot of the challenges are actually quite common with other countries, which is why I think international organisations, NATO, others, and even our cooperation with Europe and others are so important, and the UN. But I think for us, you know, it's those points I said. I think in investment education, I think for the UK, we've started seeing some green shoots in education in other parts of the UK. We could bring it here, and it can make a real difference, not just in the short term, but in the long term too.
It's fully devolved. How are you going to bring it here through a Westminster election?
Hang on, it's not quite fully devolved. And this is where I differ to every nationalist who sat on this stage, is that I don't see devolution as a wall, where just because something's devolved, you can't get involved, or you can't work with Westminster. If you're a clever politician, if you want to put your community first, you'll use your local council, you'll use Holyrood, and you'll use Westminster to deliver for you.
And that's what we'll be navigating our way through in the next 5 weeks on debate night. Right, let me hear from the audience. Lady with the blonde hair there, yes.
Hi, I'm very passionate about Scottish independence. It's something I do feel strongly about. However, I really do not know if I can honestly give my vote to SNP in the general election, considering that education and healthcare are both devolved powers. And I feel like the SNP have massively failed Scotland in both those sectors over the past few years.
Thank you. Gentleman in the glasses in the back row. Yeah.
A lot of people are talking about independence and it being stalled, but I thought in 2014 the people of Scotland voted in favour of not being independent, and that should be off the table now, surely. Maybe it's time for electoral reform so that we can actually listen to more of the people in public, I would say.
Thank you. And young man with the tartan tie in the second row. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the main issues for me are obviously health. I've seen it personally with my mum and my gran being in hospital locally here. My gran just recently passed away, but I've seen great services being provided by those that have the money and efficiency and stuff, but at the same time, I have seen massive amounts of issues regarding funding, organisation, and sorry, you know, as much as support, like independence and stuff, like, you know, 17 years where you go and you can't blame the Tories all the time. Sorry, you've been in longer. You know, you have to eventually say, well, you know, hold up my hands and say, maybe we need to look at stuff like that differently. I would 100% back them if they actually done some good stuff, but at the same time, we've got 1 in 5 almost here waiting on a waiting list for the thing. It's not good enough, you know. I'm not a believer in any sort of catchphrase like things can only get better than that. That's long gone for me, because I know that at the moment it's going the other way.
OK, one thing that needs to be fixed. Lady on the front row here.
Well, just in education, I'm sure you're aware that young teachers that have just graduated and doing primary education, there are no jobs for them after their probationary year. And this is down to councils having no money. So I don't think your education policy is working at all. OK,
thank you. We'll deal with some more of this over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. Tonight, we are in Kirkcaldy. Next week was supposed to be our last show before the summer break, but we're staying on air right through the election campaign and afterwards as well, to highlight the politicians and the policies and give you a chance to have your say. Next week, we're going to be in Oban for the first time. So if you'd like to come along, you're in the West Highlands, and be part of the audience for that show, just go to the website. Also, you'll find details of where we will be between now and the middle of July. Let's go to our second question of the night, which comes from Sandra Stewart. Sandra, good evening.
Good evening. What are the panel members' views on the Prime Minister's announcement earlier this week about the reintroduction of national service?
Thank you. Luke Graham.
So, look, in principle, I think having funded, national service opportunities for people, I think is a good thing. One of the issues that comes up time and time again on the doorstep is actually the crisis we have in teenage mental health at the moment. Also, a lack of skills and a lack of opportunities. So I think any programme that is brought online that helps that, I would support. Now, I know there's going to be a commission put forward on this to look at exactly what can be put forward, because obviously the armed forces bit, for cyber and logistics, that's the minority part of this scheme. The majority is in civic volunteering in the NHS and social care. And I think that's a really positive thing, especially when we're looking at life expectancies now that will go out to 90 plus. Just having 1 year giving back to your community, I think is probably a good deal and actually a good thing to do. And so I support that, and I've supported in the past the National Citizenship Service that's run for the last few years, which has allowed hundreds of thousands of young people new opportunities, new skills and new confidence. So I think the programme on the whole is a great initiative, but obviously we need the Commission to go through the detail, and we need to make sure we've got those funded places, both in the armed forces, but also in the opportunities in civic society as well.
What would 18-year-old Luke have chosen to do?
I think 18-year-old me, I would probably have tried to go for the armed forces, but I'm colourblind, so that limits me a little bit. But I wanted to be a doctor when I was younger. I've turned out to be an accountant, so you can take from that what you will. But I probably would have tried for the NHS as well.
Right, let's find out what the audience think of a national service. Lady in the middle, on you go.
I'd like to ask how you think an 18-year-old's going to be able to give up their weekends for volunteer work when they're probably going to have to work to fund their education or something else they're doing. Or I have children and they're not keen on this idea at all. They're quite scared. So I don't think that helps their mental health at all.
Why are they scared?
Because they think it means they're getting sent to war or being put in the armed forces where something bad will happen against their will if that's not what they want to do.
Luke Graham.
And that's not the policy. I mean, you can't...
Well, that's how it's come across.
And that may be, but I mean, the press have, if you look at every time this is on TV, they're putting clips from like the 1917, World War or World War II.
So it's our fault.
Around. No, I think you could use different clips. You could have done volunteering clips in the NHS or other clips that you could have used. So that is probably what's scared. But I think this policy needs explanation. It's part of there will be a commission to go through the detail. It's not something that's going to be rushed into. And I think to your point, and I would push this if I was elected, is that we have funded places to make sure that, like I say, this is a real expansion of opportunity for young people, which I know is something that's needed right across Scotland and the UK.
I have a real problem with this idea that you're talking about. It's mandatory volunteering. There's another word for that. It's such a bizarre idea.
But it's not different to other countries. France has obviously a national.
There's 80 countries around the world.
Then. You've got Norway, you've got Sweden. This is in I think around 80 countries around the world as well. So it's not abnormal to have one of these programs.
But hang on, Lorna. If it involved doing good works for the environment, tree planting once a month, you wouldn't be in favour of that?
Mandatory volunteer, that's not even a thing. Mandatory volunteering, there's other words for that. Making people do unpaid labour. Maybe that is national service, but it's not volunteering. One of the problems I have with this, and I think it's a hilarious policy, because I don't even think the Prime Minister means it, because his own MPs were speaking against it the week before. It's poorly thought out. But these policies are always hilarious, because there's this idea that some, people have, kids these days, we're going to sort them out with national service. Have you actually met kids these days? They're protesting, they're working, they're starting social enterprises, they're writing, they're working in their communities. They care so much
But
about
are
their
they
future,
serving
and
the
they're
public?
great. They
Are they serving their communities?
Absolutely. If you need to get out and talk to young people, they are brilliant. They've got great ideas. They care for each other. They build communities, and they want to have meaningful jobs that do contribute.
Okay, I'm going to come to the audience in a second. Christine Judd.
The thing that strikes me about this is this generation of young people who are hitting 18 at the moment have been denied so much. They were denied 2 years of their lives by COVID, which, you know, Boris Johnson and his government, the lockdowns, we can argue about that, but they were denied 2 years of their life. They were denied a lot of education in that time because they had to be taught at home. They couldn't go to school or university.
And this is going to give them all kinds of opportunities.
No, Liz Truss then denied them economic opportunities. Now, Rishi Sunak is denying them the choice. Now, a career in the armed forces or in community service can be a great thing if it's your choice. But they're being denied the choice, and the government is saying, you will do. That's not fair. This generation have lost so much. They've lost the opportunity that we all had to be better off than our parents.
So why does this
to have
work?
a better
Why does
life.
this work throughout Scandinavia, but we can't make it work?
But we don't live in Scandinavia. We live here. And it's our young people that I'm concerned about. There's lots of things they do in Scandinavia that we don't do here. They pay higher taxes than we do. We can't just... We have to look at what it means for our young people. They've been denied too much over the last 5 years. Rishi Sunak is denying them the choice of how they live their lives and what they do with their futures.
Shall we hear from some young people? There's one, man in the front row.
I just want to get this straight, Luke. You're wanting 18-year-olds to sign up for national service to help communities that the Tories have spent 14 years crippling and have put nothing back into.
Obviously, I would agree, like, say, 3 billion in levelling up funding, initiatives right the way across, record money for the NHS as well, the highest block grant since devolution started.
You've just said
these are all investments that the Conservatives made across the UK.
No, but
so
you've just said the SNP are responsible
I wouldn't
for
agree with the premise. I wouldn't agree with the premise. They're not responsible for levelling up funding.
No, but you've just said they're responsible for health.
No, that comes from
And then you've said that you've given to the NHS. So
and bypass the devolution settlement by not going to the
Are you taking responsibility for Scotland, or are you leaving it with the SNP?
No, I think to be fair, and anyone who's ever spoken to me when we're in these debates, I do take, and I have had to take the responsibility for what the Conservative Party done, whether MPs I've agreed with it or not.
But look, this is also
hang on a second. I want to hear from Sandra, who asked the question, who's had her hand up for the last few minutes listening to this. Sandra, what do you think?
Thank you. I want to pick up something that I heard Luke Graham say. He mentioned mental health. As a psychologist, I'm sick and tired of people talking about mental health and using it as empty rhetoric, putting people into mandatory volunteering is more likely to cause psychological health problems and be detrimental to well-being than allowing people freedom of choice. And as I understand it, I didn't hear this, but I heard second-hand that Douglas Ross said that national service could combat loneliness. I have never in my life, in my professional life, heard such a ludicrous statement made by someone who represents a community. It's absolute nonsense.
Sandra, thank you. Tommy Sheppard, aged 18, if this scheme had existed, what would you have done?
I would probably have gone to a different country, which is what I did do when I became 18. Look, let's call this for what it is. It's a gimmick, right? It's a gimmick, and it's designed for a political purpose, which is not ever to be implemented, but to try and win back support for the Conservative Party, which is leaching to their right to the Reform Party. So they're trying to, appeal to that people who have still got a mindset in the 1950s when everything was lovely, who read the Daily Mail, who are, Conservative voters who are switching to Reform. This is a gimmick to try and pull them back.
Well, it's not a gimmick in France. Macron's introduced it in France.
We're not talking about France. We're talking about what is being proposed. Look,
but if it works in other countries, why can't it work here?
You're happy to refer to the Nordic countries otherwise.
If you could stop interrupting, Luke, for a moment. I don't think anybody, right, would object to the idea of young people being more actively engaged in their communities and their societies, and for having various schemes to help them do that. I think what is objectionable is the idea of forcing people and waiting till the age of 18 to force them to do this. And if the government really were interested in civic engagement, then they wouldn't have labelled it national service. The words national service have been used to resonate with the past and to appeal to a particular demographic of voters which you are losing. And I'll give you an alternative, actually, which would offer opportunities for young people.
Is this going to be in the SNP manifesto?
No, even, I don't know. But even without rejoining the European Union, this country could work with the existing European Union on a scheme for young people which would allow young people in the UK to go to other European countries visa-free and be able to work and study for a year. Right? They could do that. It was offered by the European Union and it was rejected by this government, and sadly it was also rejected by the Labour Party, which is why a lot of people actually think that this election, whilst of course it's about change, they despair that actually there might not be much change.
Jackie Baillie.
I find that astonishing. I was going to agree with Tommy about the gimmick, but let me just deal with the last point, because actually it was a scheme. It was called Erasmus. It was something that we valued across the United Kingdom. It provided opportunities for young people to go and engage with, you know, different institutions in Europe. Fantastic scheme. The SNP promised that they would replace it. We're still waiting, you know. So please do not lecture me about what needs to happen and how Labour blocked it. You're in power. You had an opportunity to do something about it. Let me turn to the gimmick.
Not without you.
Because on that point, Tommy and I agree. It's an election gimmick. That's what this is about, because the Tories have hollowed out our armed forces to the extent that they are now at a level not seen since Napoleonic times, you know, and that's certainly quite some time ago. To be honest about this, Rishi Sunak doesn't believe in this, because when he was Chancellor, when David Cameron was actually in office, remember David Cameron had a scheme for young people volunteering. Well, Rishi Sunak cut the budget by 2/3. That scheme withered on the vine as a result of this. So I would take no lessons from Rishi Sunak about volunteering. This isn't volunteering. It's compulsion. It's a gimmick. It's because it's an election.
Thank you. Young man on the front row.
Just so I'm under the correct understanding, the Conservatives expect a young person like me to dump all of my life plans to serve and volunteer under the name of a government that I've even voted for. I think that's just outrageous, and I think
your views on this and everything else that you hear on the programme this evening, the hashtag is BBCDN on social media. Let's go to our third question tonight, which comes from Brendan Fox. Brendan, evening.
Evening. Hi. I'd like to ask the panel about, with Scotland's performance in the international PISA tables going right down, like the mental health and well-being of our children, surely it's time to ban mobile phones from the classroom.
Thank you, Brendan. Now, last week we were down in Galashiels with Debate Night, and Galashiels Academy have done just that. This week, a House of Commons Education Committee recommended a total ban on smartphone ownership for under 16s. The Scottish Government have empowered head teachers to take their own decisions on this. What do you think, Brendan?
I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea. I don't think children should have mobile phones at school at all. In the playground or in the classroom, it just disrupts their education. It stops them learning. They can't focus. Teachers can't concentrate on what they want to do. And after COVID, you know, they need as much help as they can get. And we need to help them make the right decisions. We need to remove the mobile phone.
And you work in schools, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And I know we've got teachers and pupils in the audience this evening as well, so I'd love to hear from you on this. Jackie Baillie, this is one of these subjects where parents and teachers have really clear views about it, but politicians seem to be struggling to keep up.
I don't think politicians are struggling to keep up. I think I recognise that in some school settings, young people will use mobile phones to do research, to aid whatever they're doing. Inappropriate use of mobile phones should absolutely be clamped down if it's disrupting children in a school setting.
What does that mean, inappropriate use of mobile phones?
Well, if you're chatting, if you're looking at Twitter, if you're on Facebook chatting with your pals, that's inappropriate use. You should be focused on the lesson in hand.
And who's going to clamp down on that?
New technology just now is at such a stage that I know I can find out lots of information at an instant on my mobile phone. Our ability to use that as a learning instrument is there, but clearly that's not what's going on in many schools across the country. I do think it is appropriate to leave it to the head teacher and the class teacher to decide what should be appropriate in any given setting, rather than politicians deciding blanket policy across the board. But if you were to ask me personally, do I think they should be banned, I would probably be in favour of banning them. My poor daughter didn't get a mobile phone till she was well advanced in school, because I reckoned that it wasn't necessary.
How old was she?
I can't remember now. She's too old now. I'm not going to admit to her age now. But certainly I think there's a balance to be had, and I think the people best placed to decide on that are actually teachers.
Lady on the front row.
Hi there. I work in education as well. I love digital technology. It has a massive place in the classroom, but mobile phones aren't the way to do it. We need the budget from the government to have all schools to all have access to iPads. Some do, some don't. And the reason we can't take their mobile phones off them is because then we've been told that we are responsible. So if there's any damage to the phone, if there's a scratch, parents will say that it was us that damaged it. So we're too scared to do anything about it because we don't have any backing from anybody higher. So we need somebody higher to actually put it in place so that then we feel supported and then the kids can learn. And that comes without removing digital technology, because that has a massive impact on the kids' education.
So you think politicians really have to take the decision on this in terms of funding whatever replaces these devices, but also taking a hard decision on it?
Absolutely, because then there's no inconsistency. Everybody's following the same thing. Kids are all about having fair and rights to everything, and a child's right, of course they are, but the only way it will be fair is if it comes from the top down, and us as teachers feel supported and we feel like we have your backing and actually giving the kids the education they deserve without the distraction of social media.
Okay, no ifs, no buts. Tommy Sheppard?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would support a blanket ban in all circumstances. I understand the argument. I can see how it would be extremely disruptive if some kids are trying to use a mobile phone while you're trying to teach a lesson, of course. So certainly I don't think that mobile phones should be allowed in a classroom setting unless it's for a very specific defined purpose related to what is being taught. So that shouldn't happen. I'm not sure I would go so far as banning kids using them in the playground or at break. But I mean, I think the best thing to do is I sort of agree with what Jackie said. I think we leave it to the head teachers and we leave it to individual schools.
There's somebody who works in education who says that's not working, Tommy.
Well, no, but maybe not, but I think we need to look at that particular school and talk to this. I mean, you need to talk to your head.
I think
to find out.
But I actually like the idea of the iPad,
what I wanted to say was that
I think the...
What I want to say is that I mean, this isn't going to go away, right? This problem is just going to keep getting worse and worse. So I think it would be a useful exercise to do some pilot projects and trial bans in certain schools for certain times, and let's get some hard information about the effect.
You're not convinced, are you?
We've tried it. I mean, we've tried taking their phones off them. We've tried different things, but because we don't have the backing, every council then says, "Oh well, it's the school's responsibility. If you've got a scratch in the phone, how do we prove it wasn't there?" There's too many bitty things about it, and digital technology is so important for their future. We need a solution.
Are we just passing the buck here, Luke Graham?
No, I couldn't agree more, and actually we need to do more of listening to educators like yourself. I mean, I completely agree with the iPad point as well. And of course, that was an SNP promise. Hang on, 10 years ago, every kid would get an iPad. I mean, where are they? Because we had promised them, where are they? So I agree with that we should have iPads, and I also agree that we should probably get funding for lockers in the schools so that when kids come in, they lock them up, they're safe and secure, and of course, at the end of the school day, they can reconnect, they're safe, because I know a lot of parents have worries about them on the way home and things, and if people aren't at home when they get back, and so they're safe and secure that way. So there's a simple, direct answer for you and a simple, direct solution. If only the SNP would get on and do it.
Okay, thank you. Lady in the purple, in the middle here. Yeah.
Missing as part of this conversation as well is about like phones not just being a distraction in the classroom, but about the mental health risks and about the sense of communication, relationships with other people, and yet some of that was lost during COVID, and trying to sort of rebuild those skills, and yet that's a big part that I think should be considered, and that's could potentially have like long-term impacts. You spoke about like mental health issues amongst young people and just, yeah, rising costs within the NHS and the workforce. So just, to me, that is a bigger harm and a bigger risk to be considered. And just listening to you on the stage, I'm a bit concerned that there's a really superficial understanding about what we're even talking about right now.
We've had teachers in the audience before in debate night on this issue saying that bullying that happens in the classroom then continues outside the classroom via these devices as well. Lady in the back row. Yes.
Hi there, just linking on what all you're saying just now. So I've got 4 children and my youngest is 13 and she's getting really badly bullied at school. So again, an inappropriate use, Jackie, would be of people filming people fighting. So you see this all the time and it's rife. So certainly the schools need to do something about phone use, but they also need to do something about bullying. And I think the government at the top level needs to bring that down, because the schools just say we can't do anything, you know, call the police, what have you. So my youngest daughter, she wants to go to school. She's a clever girl, but her attainment level is low. The older ones went to school if they had a broken leg. But, you know, she's losing out on her schooling because of the bullying.
So she's not going to school at the moment because of this?
She's not going to school at the moment. I had the police around today for various things, because these bullies, because the schools have tried to contact parents, these bullies are now calling me on my number at 1 in the morning, giving me grief. So there has to be something done, because kids who have poor mental health, if certainly COVID's affected them, like Christine said earlier. You know, we've had COVID, which kept them away from school. A lot of kids, it's like they're feral, and the schools are having to deal with it. So yes, mobile phone usage is a big thing, but we've got to tackle the bullying, because the mental health, no wonder people have got poor mental health. And it doesn't help that the government are buying into this, you can be a male, a female or a teapot, because, hello, gender identities and everything else are getting put into schools here. It should be literacy that's in schools, not litter trays. So everything is needing a big redress for education.
Oh, I'm so sorry you've gone through this, but thanks for sharing it with us. Christine John, speak to that lady there. Isn't this why politicians need to act on this? Because bullying and phones have now become tied together.
Yeah, and what the lady says is, I'm really sorry to hear that you have had all these problems, and it must be horrendous for your daughter and for all of you. And what you have said and what the lady in purple said and the teacher down here, we have a massive problem. And it's all very well to say it's up to the schools, but we keep giving schools responsibility without backing them up. We keep saying to teachers, this is your job, but we're not going to give you any backing, we're not going to give you any training, we're not going to give you any money. You just have to do it. Take their phones off them. Well, what about the problems that causes? Well, it's up to the individual school. We do need a policy about it, and there's absolutely no doubt that kids having phones in the classroom and abusing them, and as Jackie says, inappropriate use, we have to stop. We also have to remember, though, that for parents, sometimes they need to keep in touch with the kids. We can't rewind the clock. We can't change the fact that we all rely on our phones for constant communications. But we do need to have a policy which deals with the problem.
Right, so what is that policy? We're all waiting for it. Come on, what's the policy?
Well, the policy, I don't think it's an outright ban. I don't think that is right. But I think there needs to be a policy which backs up the schools and says that we will back the schools if they ban phones. And if parents are not happy, that phones get damaged, etc., it's not the school's responsibility. There is a process that they have to go through. Now, I think this is something that we need to look at, that councils need to look at, the Scottish Government needs to look at, Westminster needs to look at.
Well, we're all looking at it
and look at it properly.
But what are we going to do about it?
Well, what we have to do is listen to what the teachers are saying. We probably need that thing that I hate, which is a consultation exercise. We need to actually listen to people and then put it into practice. Because I could say to you sitting here just now, I've got the solution, but no, I don't, because it's a long time since I was in a school.
But actually, I think the interesting point that's been made tonight is there's an acceptance that digital technology is important. It's the future. Yes. But there's a different way of doing it. So I like the idea of every child getting an iPad through the school, because that will aid their education, but it's also a leveller. It means everybody gets one. Some kids have mobile phones, others don't. That's a clever way, I think, of resolving
So you're still working on manifestos. You're going to go away and look at that after tonight?
I always work on manifestos. I don't sleep. I work on manifestos. But it's that practical, good idea that comes from, if I dare say it, the chalk face, that you actually know what would work. and so we should do it.
All right, you
But
get the
that's
credit
where
if this happens.
politicians are wrong.
Tommy Sheppard.
Well, and can I also, I mean, the situation the woman at the back described is horrific. I mean, I think we need to try some stuff and see what works and what doesn't work. But I'm conscious of another dimension to this, which is that no matter what you do inside the school during school hours, people live outside the school as well. So there's no point just trying to deal with a problem that simply puts it outside the school gate. I mean, the school is a place where you have some degree of control and regulation and an ability to lead and develop people. I think we should look at how we could use that in order to make sure that digital technology is used in a positive and appropriate way. And that will mean sanctions when it's not, right? And of course it will mean support to build, to provide the money to have, I don't know, lots of mini lockers where people can deposit their phone or whatever it takes. Of course, if you say to individual schools it's your policy, that only works if you're prepared to back them up. And I would hope the Scottish Government would do that.
And they're the ones who know what they need.
Let me hear from that young lady in the front row. Yeah, on you go.
Hi there. I think there's consistency that's needed throughout the full of Scotland, because that's what young people need. They need consistency, and there's not that going on at the moment. You've got some schools, every pupil has a laptop, every pupil has an iPad. You've got some schools that don't. How is that fair? That's not having consistency, and that's probably why there's issues with the phones, because they're not able to get the utilities that they need.
Lorna, Slater, do you think politicians are taking this issue seriously enough? Because it's clearly a serious issue for the audience.
Well, I think we've had a good conversation here about this tonight, and I'm certainly will be taking this back to Holyrood to discuss with my colleagues. I think what you're saying there about more backup for teachers and head teachers so that they can implement these rules, I'd really like to understand what that looks like. What does that actually look like on the ground? Does it mean physical hardware like lockers? Does it mean guidelines so that you can say we're following the government guidelines? Does it mean investment in the digital technologies? So I think this is a really good conversation to have, but the point made in the front row here is so good. It is really distressing to me that pupils across the country are having a different experience, and that's clearly something that we need to address. Every pupil in Scotland should be getting, as you say, consistency in that experience. So this has actually been a really interesting conversation, I think, and I'm pleased that everyone's been able to contribute.
So when the Scottish Government say head teachers have got autonomy to take decisions on this and they'll be backed, you're saying that's not good enough? There needs to be policy across the country on this?
I think that there's a couple of different things. I don't think it's necessarily helpful for politicians in Holyrood to sort of go, head teachers shall do this. I don't think that's what anybody wants. But what was said in the front row is that head teachers want backup when they make a strong decision on this, that they know that we have their back. But the question on consistency was more about how we do what materials are available to different students, which is a slightly different question, although related. And I think that is that's a key point clearly to delivering education. So I'm really glad you made that contribution.
Okay, let me hear from the man in the white T-shirt there.
There's a big issue now with schooling, with education. The teachers are not listening to the parents. Now, I've seen it many times with racism, come from the black ethnic minority, with racism, stuff like that. The views, they're not coming across. Things are getting hidden behind the scenes. Teachers are not coming and speaking to parents. So I think phones should be banned in class, but they should be kept with the kids because they need them, because things are getting worse and worse, you know.
So how would that work? How would you do that?
Sorry?
How would that work?
What do you mean? Phones?
Yeah.
In lockers, or so the kids can put them, and then later on when they're going home, for security, for something, if something happened to them, you know.
Okay, thank you. A man on the back row with the glasses.
I think this probably needs a bit more consultation with the young people, because as far back as when I was at school, and probably further, as soon as any sort of technology was involved, the young people were always further ahead than the teachers and their parents, and could work around anything that was put in place, I would say. And actually bullying's not going to go away because you take their phones away. Bullying existed before that, so I don't think taking phones away from pupils is going to solve any problem.
Finally, Luke Graham.
Look, I think it's a great conversation, but I think we've seen some consistency tonight, and especially from educators as well, where it's clear that we want action, not just words. And again, words were pledged years ago to give every child an iPad, and yet they still haven't got them. That was an SNP promise that hasn't been delivered. So we don't need constant conversations and consultations and strategy documents. Sometimes we know what's right. Young people are saying it to us, that they want action taken. educators are saying to us for action to be taken. If that means iPads in the classrooms and extra money for lockers, I think that's what the Scottish Government should do. But let's get on with it and get the action taken so we can help those people who are being bullied now, and also then look at the other support services that supply
Is
along.
this the kind of thing where there could be cross-party working, where you could all
It shouldn't be a
get
political
together on this?
issue.
I would hope so.
It shouldn't be a political issue. We should listen to the kids, we should listen to the educators and get on with it. And there isn't a political stance to take on it because we should all agree on
So who's going to put that in their manifesto?
Well, I mean, I agree, but save that, it will eventually come back to money, right? So that's where you get political about what size of budget the Scottish Government's going to have and what size of block grant it's going to get from the Westminster Government. And I'm afraid that is being cut in real terms. So that doesn't make it easy to deliver anything.
Fraser Valander Institute, everyone says it's one of the highest block grants since devolution began. So you can't pull a fast on people and say it's been cut in real terms when it hasn't.
So
just be honest with people.
We talk about the block grant a lot on debate night, so I think we all know where we are on that. The hashtag is BBCDN for your views on everything you hear tonight. Let's go to our fourth question of the night, which comes from Graham. Graham Duncan, good evening.
Hi. According to Marine Scotland, there are currently 112 oil and gas platforms operating in the North Sea, supporting 100,000 direct jobs. Can the panel tell me how all of these different jobs will find work in the wind power revolution, as many of them are not transferable?
I wonder where we'll start. Lorna Slater.
Very good. It's really important to understand, of course, that we are looking at phasing out oil and gas. So we need to finish extracting the oil and gas from our existing fields. So the people working on existing fields don't need to be concerned. That needs to be done. But what we mustn't do is open up new fields. We can't continue to expand oil and gas exploration and during a climate crisis. We just can't do it. We have to phase this out. Now, there is a huge potential in Scotland for clean, renewable energy. And you're right, not every single job is exactly transferable, but many of the skills are very similar. Working offshore on an oil rig, there are many transferable skills to working offshore on wind turbines. And this is what we need to plan for in Scotland. Oil and gas has actually been in decline for more than a decade, and it does need to continue to decline. But nobody, and I want to be so clear about this because we get misrepresented all the time, is pretending we're going to shut down the oil and gas industry overnight. The existing fields will continue to be exploited and run out as that resource is no longer required. And we will transition to clean, renewable energy as we move toward net zero.
Right, Lorna, you've been very clear on that, Lorna. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely not. I mean, at any one time on an oil and gas platform, and I've run quite a number, is there about anything where from 100 to maybe 400, depending on the size of the platform. There's everything for cooks, helicopter landing officers, deck crew, there's highly skilled technicians, mechanical, electrical instruments, and there's a whole array of soft support from onshore, 100,000 jobs. So to keep the platform going, you need this 100. How many does it actually take to look after a windmill? Because that's basically what they are. The most you can get up that windmill is 3 people. So go and tell me where this revolution is going to fill this void for 100,000 jobs currently in the oil and gas industry. You're living in a different world. Jobs are not transferable because you've got electrical jobs on a turbine, you've got mechanical jobs. You don't need painters, you don't need cooks, you don't need helicopter landing officers, you don't need any of those.
You do land helicopters on them.
On one platform, the collector platform, but in general. So you've got a tiny little industry that you want to invest in, and there's this huge industry that is going to be just dumped.
Lorna, in terms of the jobs that cannot be transferred, which is what Graham's talking about, what happens to those people?
So we do need to be able to have pathways for people to reskill and upskill, but those oil rigs that are out there will continue to work. Those jobs will continue to be in operation. That's not going anywhere. So those people can be reassured. But what we need to do is make sure that people, and this is already happening, who have transferable skills can use those, that there are opportunities to retrain. There are huge opportunities coming in renewable energy for not only generation with wind, green hydrogen, and there's a whole bunch of land-based skills, forestry. We need to upgrade also our heat networks in the country. That's all. So my background is in engineering. I'm an electromechanical engineer. Designing and installing heat networks around the country is an engineering task. That will require a lot of hardware technicians. Like there's so much to do and so many opportunities in Scotland. What we actually have a challenge of is having the people with the technical skills to take on these opportunities.
Okay,
and
all right.
Oil and gas workers are exactly the right people to reskill and move into these exciting new industries.
And this is about jobs. Tommy Sheppard, presumption against or for new oil and gas?
Well, the Scottish Government's consulting on exactly that question and has now been told that the consultation can't continue until after the election. So we'll have to wait and see. But so I mean,
Stephen Flynn seems to be hinting at a bit of a change in the position on that.
Well, no, there's no change. There's no change. I mean, the party's policy is quite clear. I mean, the question was about existing oil and gas, but if you want to talk about new stuff, I can do that as well. The party's policy is quite clear that any proposal to open a new oil or gas field in the North Sea or anywhere else needs to be judged against a series of principles about whether or not that is going to be compatible with the pathway to net zero. That's a simple task, right? And I would have thought, you know, there might be cases where you could argue it is compatible because it's replacing something that you can define and it's part of a strategy.
So presumption possible?
I would have thought it would be unlikely that major oil fields the size of Campbell would be compatible with that, right? But the point is that the gentleman was talking about existing oil and gas technology and 100,000 jobs. And I think it's important to say that the commitment that needs to be given by government is to those people that they will not necessarily get the job that they're in now for life, but that they won't be forgotten about as the North East turns into a series of ghost towns. And in fact, they will be prioritised for retraining and for new employment opportunities and given some sort of job guarantee as this transition takes place. That's what we mean when we talk about a just transition. And it's not just 3 people running a windmill. We need an army of skilled heating and insulation engineers to go and retrofit our buildings to save energy. We need people engaged in doing the oil extraction in reverse as we capture and pump CO2 into empty oil beds. We need people working on a whole range of things to, not just with wind, but to manufacture and to service wind turbines. These are important, skilled, high-paid jobs for the future.
They're just very different jobs from what we've got at the moment.
Well, some of them will be very different. Some of them will not be so different. But we need to be able to make sure that the people in the sector at the minute are prioritised and not left and forgotten
All right,
about.
Tommy, you made your point. Yeah, let me hear from the gentleman there with his hand up. Yes, sir, on you go. The striped top. Yeah.
Right. Just wanted to ask there, the Scottish Government or the UK Government has invested in wind turbines up off the north of Scotland. Ofgem yesterday found one company £33 million for breaching their terms. That was one of 5, but the other 4, it was £45 million, and that money's going back in to reinvest back into an industry that's not doing their job and delivering what they should be doing.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to keep going with the audience here. Gentleman with the tie. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about times where we have such a high energy demand and sometimes we don't produce enough to actually generate energy. And, you know, like times where we're all using mobile phones and stuff, we're all driving electric cars. What charges them? You know, there's times where we have no wind in this country, you know. Very rare, but we do have those days. Yeah.
What do we do then? Jackie Baillie.
So, for me, it's about reducing bills. It's about making sure that we have energy security in our country and ensuring that we are protecting jobs and having a just transition. Now, the fields that we have, the North Sea oil fields, are mature. It will become more difficult to extract from them over time. There have been exploration licenses awarded. A Labour government would not change that. And what we would do is invest in making sure we extract as much as we can from the fields that we already have. Now, there will be jobs that remain in the North Sea for decades to come. But we do need to invest in clean power. We do need to make sure that when we're building all these wind farms, that actually is not the 3 men, or women for that matter, that are looking at the wind farms. It's who's building the turbines. We're not building the turbines in Scotland. All that work is going abroad. We should be making sure we anchor the supply chain in Scotland, in the United Kingdom.
How do you do that if other countries are more competitive?
We do that by creating Great British Energy. We do that by making sure we plan the investment and that we actually secure that supply chain. Now, we've estimated...
I don't understand that. So how's Great British Energy going to make sure that wind turbines are built in Scotland?
Because what you do is you plan it. So when you are actually consenting for wind farms to go up, you are also making sure the supply chain is there in a planned way to deliver those jobs, to deliver those turbines. It doesn't take a huge amount of planning, but it takes an industrial strategy that actually looks at how we bring forward clean power in the future. Can I also add, if you look at the opportunities that there are here, there are huge opportunities in Scotland. We're not exploiting them. We think GB Energy will create 50,000 jobs, on top of which there will be investment in warm homes, reskilling people that would create another 19,000 jobs.
Jackie, we're tight on time. Look, Graham.
I mean, just to come in, first and foremost, I think it would be hard for anyone in the North East to believe the SNP and Greens are friends of the oil and gas industry after almost 10 years of slamming that industry in a presumption against oil and gas. So firstly, we've got to realise that actually this isn't an either-or between renewable and oil and gas. In order to have a proper and just transition, we need to make sure we've got a secure gas supply, especially gas. We need oil for plastics and medical supplies, as you say rightly, sir. But obviously you want to, in the longer term, transition to that renewables. We've had enormous investments in wind. We've got some incredible innovation up in Shetland and Orkney, which we can be proud of for the whole UK, where we're leading new tech that's been invested by the UK government and others, where we can actually lead on the renewables. So it's not an either or, it's a both. And I think the UK government and the Scottish government should take a lead in championing that and making sure we secure the jobs, not only for this generation, but the next
Christine Jardine.
I actually heard something different from the rest of you when the gentleman asked the question, maybe because I lived in Aberdeen for 10 years of my life, but I also come from Clydebank, and I saw what happened when the shipbuilding industry died, and there were other opportunities elsewhere. Those skills are transferable, people were told. When the steel industry died, those skills are transferable, mining, everything. It's not about the 100,000 jobs, it's about the 100,000 people. The 100,000 people whose lives currently depend and their livelihoods depend on North Sea oil. How are we going to help them? How are we going to prevent them becoming victims of change in the way the Clydeside generations there became victims of change? In Motherwell and Lanarkshire, generations became victims, and in Sheffield. How do we stop that? We need to invest. Yes, everybody agrees we need to transition to greener, cleaner energy. We need a just transition. But that just transition will be for the next generation. There will be opportunities for them. What do we do with the engineers now? What do we do with the exploration specialists who are 50? Where are they going to find another job? We have to invest in making sure that there is support in Aberdeen and throughout, not just the North East, but throughout Scotland and the United Kingdom, for the people whose livelihoods will end. They are the people we need to support.
Do you know, I think we're going to be up in Aberdeen in a few weeks' time, where I know we will carry this conversation on. But that's it for this evening. A busy few weeks ahead. Next week, we're going to be in Oban. Details on all the other locations after the election, before the election as well, on our website. Check it out there. If you missed any of tonight's programme, we're repeated a bit later on BBC One Scotland, or you can catch it any time that suits you on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you very much indeed to my panel here tonight, and to our audience in Kirkcaldy, and to you at home for watching wherever you are. We'll see you next week in Oban. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well from all of us in Debate Night. Good night.